All right. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Hello, Danae. Hello, Chris. Hello, Aaron. Early birds. That's always me. I'm always on time.
She prefers to be sitting in her car for like 10 to 15 minutes before the 10 to 15
It's
minutes
just
early that she is,
considerate. It's considerate of people's time
No,
from
don't say that if they're recording
Minneapolis.
it. Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
People come late. You're considerate too. You've got busy lives. It's all
Yeah.
right.
We're really excited to tackle this topic today. We'd also like to know if people feel like sharing, like how old your kids are, how many you have. I think that's always interesting to know because every stage is so different in terms of parenting. So if
Yeah.
you feel comfortable sharing what age you're parenting right now, we'd like to know.
It makes a difference.
It makes a difference.
Man, even like 2 weeks ago makes a difference to right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it really does. All right, 7 and 5. I'm excited for that. We have this is a good we can talk about.
Okay.
So I'm Brianna, also known as Bree Leche, and this is my husband, Daniel.
Sidekick.
Sidekick.
Yeah.
And we have a little bit about us. We've been together for almost 13 years now. We met when we were very young, 21. And oh my gosh, it's 1 a.m. in the UK. Thanks for being here. We're asleep. And you have a child? Or
you gotta get in that self, time any way you can.
That's true. I'm up that late sometimes. But what was I saying? Oh, so we met at a really early age, which is kind of a part of the reason why we've been non-monogamous in some form since the beginning, which makes us we've been practicing non-monogamy for over a decade. I think really getting the handle of it really most recently in the past few years, which has also coincided with becoming parents.
Mm-hmm.
We are parents to an almost 5-year-old and a just turned 3-year-old. Yes, we had them too close together, we know. but we're making it, I think.
Kind of. You said we're kind of figuring it out or handling it, and I would say that it's just like it's ever changing. The landscape is ever changing, both as parents, but then also, I guess, our own individual journeys, how like that plays out in our relationship to one another, constantly moving into different sort of chapters. So yeah, we never have it figured out is the answer.
I mean, no one does. And I think people with older children can confirm that it's a journey that you're always trying to figure it out. But there's some couples here too. I love that. Couples and singles topic is relevant for all. But yeah, as soon as people have questions, go ahead and type them in. Like what do we want to hear about? What do we want to talk about? We're excited to see where this goes because we've been in it. Like we have been in it trying to figure out.
And you're catching us also at a very particular time as well. Like I just kind of mentioned jokingly that if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago what my feelings were or what the balance of my life was between dating and parenting, it would have been a completely different answer than it is right now. And then go back another 6 months before that, completely different answer. So I think that that's another interesting thing about like this topic of like parenting and dating, because like if you're a parent, it's not like there's this kind of like, yes, being a parent changes your life in a lot of ways, and that, but it's also not like a simple binary. Your experience is so different depending on, as you guys are putting in your kids' ages, your experience is so different depending on how old your kids are. It's so different depending on whether like you're partnered with your parent, whether you're like in a period of separation, your co-parent, you're in a period of separation. It's different depending on like what it is you want out of dating life, and it's also so different depending on parenting ethos and style as well.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. We have a question from Danae. Thanks, Danae. What is your dynamic like right now with non-monogamy? That's a good question. So recently we have been in a really intense parenting season. So I think we the way that our non-monogamy looks is more casual relationships than it has looked in the past. Currently Daniel has one person that he's seeing,
who's also a long distance
yeah,
person,
she's
by the way.
bi-coastal,
Yeah.
so that works really well for us right now, as parenting takes up so much time of our energy currently because they are both toddlers. And for me, I have one person that I'm seeing pretty consistently, that's like a boyfriend energy, and very understanding of what it means to date a mother, and how sometimes I'm less available than others. And I am more focused right now, I think, on relationships that allow me to explore sexually. And so my intention with those that I'm very like upfront about is that I'm looking for things that are more casual, more no strings attached, more play partner arena.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what it looks for us right now. We have a lot of I don't know if we're really flirting with relationship anarchy over here, where like a lot of our friends are, former lovers that are still really close to us. And a lot of we also like have a commune style living situation. So even though we're not sexual with these people, it still like has a lot of the intimacy of a lot of like romantic relationships. So I think that's how I'll answer that question. Did you want to add anything?
Well, a couple of things. Like first of all, like the question about this, like, what is our relationship like to non-monogamy?
There's a lot of other questions
right now.
too.
Yeah. Okay. So, we'll get to them. But like for me, like I had undergone like probably my most active season of dating as a parent, right? To like fairly young kids. And I feel like I had like maybe had like probably a 2-year season of that where I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about like the types of relationships I was looking for. I learned a lot also about like the types of friendships that I wanted to cultivate as well. And I'm kind of like I've moved from like, I'd say summer on out of a season of more intense, like kind of cultivation of like romantic and sexual connections. And a lot of like the people that I met in that time have sort of like kind of aged and progressed into like something that looks more like, I don't know, platonic friendships with like the possibility of sex and romance there, or like a history of that. So
yeah, we're more in like relationship anarchy territory, I feel like. And that's where we want to move into. And I think that makes sense also like as parents, which we can talk about more later.
You got the better eyes. You want to get some more questions?
Yeah. Let's see. Do you guys do anything to juggle taking care of the kids versus going on dates? Like how much one parent watches the kids versus making sure each parent gets time away to date? My husband and I have a 2-year-old.
Yeah. Thanks, Olivia.
Oh, do you want to take it?
No, that was just me saying hello.
Yeah, I think when you're maybe, I don't know where you guys are at in like your non-monogamous journey, but I think like there can be a little bit of like a focus on like fairness sometimes, and like you went on a date, so now I need to go on a date. And I think that we can get really caught up in that, but like
on making it one for one and fair on like a weekly basis, right?
And I think that the way that what we've kind of landed on is just we use our calendar a lot, and like we kind of schedule like windows of time that we give the other person, and what they use it for is like up to them, because sometimes one person's seeing, a few people that they want to see. Maybe you're not seeing anyone you want to see, but it's still really important as a parent to make sure that you're getting that time and using it for self-care in some form, whether it's dating or going to the coffee shop and journaling or seeing a friend. Like there's so many ways to take care of yourself. Dating, I think, can be one of those like outlets, but that's kind of what we landed on, I'll say, is like just having windows scheduled in every week, so we know that we're getting time out of the house and a break from parenting, and we're giving each other those breaks, but it doesn't necessarily have to be for dating.
Yeah. And I think that there can be this sort of inherent pressure, like if she's using it to date and see people, like you can have this sort of inherent like self-imposed pressure of like, okay, well, I need to get out there and like start seeing people. But I think like we're finally at the point where we're slow to learn, but we're but we are learning, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, like I'm learning that time can be used for a multitude of things, all of which kind of feed into my well-being in a different way. And sometimes that's dating, but sometimes it's just like going to play basketball at the park or whatever. Yeah. But the other thing that you said earlier that I think is also important is that like it's really easy to fixate on fairness as being like it must be fair within the scope of this week, and it must be fair within the scope of this week. Like everybody's getting one day. But I think with the ebbs and flows
of people's needs,
and in trying to kind of do like a long-term consensual non-monogamy, like, and what that looks like and how that looks like, what fairness looks like is over the long term, right? It's not, if you were to take like a 6-month sample size, like there have been 6-month little segments where it looks like
I don't even want to date.
Yeah. Or like she doesn't even want to date, or like I'm like the only one getting time out, right? To see people and cultivate like romantic and sexual like relationships and all of that. But then it can swing in another 6-month section. So I think it's about kind of taking the longer view of fairness and what that means.
Okay. Thanks, Olivia. That was a good question. Next one. I'm interested in hearing about how y'all bring up what level of depth at this point y'all talk about other relationships with y'all's kiddos and how much exposure they have. That's okay. We knew we were gonna get this one.
Yeah.
Do you want to take it, or you want me to take it?
Oh, why don't you start?
Okay. I think, well, because our children are toddlers, right? Like everything needs to be really age appropriate. And I think that sometimes folks who are exploring non-monogamy as either a couple or as an individual, like you can get really excited and maybe share too much too early, because like really your kids don't need to know until they ask. That's actually a really good gauge of like when they're ready for information, is that they'll ask about it. And it doesn't mean you need to hide anything, but the way that we handle it, once again, going back to like relationship anarchy and the fact that we're really trying to cultivate a community of people that are around that aren't all our lovers, right? So our kids as toddlers, they don't need to know like who we're doing what with, right? So like it all can be handled the same as you would handle friendships. Like daddy's going out to hang out with so and so, and you can use their name. Mommy's going out to hang out or to have some mommy time, you know, like they're 2 and 4 right now, so that they're not having those questions yet. And like I would be curious for folks here with older kids, like how what kind of questions have come up and when. But from what I know about,
chime in with that.
But from what I know about child development, like they'll let you know when they have those questions and by asking, and then you can answer them honestly. And if you're cultivating a sex positive household from the beginning, it shouldn't, and really what's important is cultivating like open channels of communication from the beginning, then it shouldn't be as challenging. I think I feel good about that.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about like how fluid a lot of our relationships are over time. So it's like this person who, like, when I start seeing, I'm like maybe sleeping with, you know, in like another 6 months, like if this is a person that I'm like interested in like maintaining a relationship with beyond that, like maybe I'm maybe sometimes gonna pass and it's no longer gonna be a sexual relationship. So I kind of like to think about like, you know, I think that for our kids, at least at the age that they're at, and I imagine that this will be the case like as they get older too, I think it's important that we're kind of building a community where we're always kind of engaging with friends and having and bringing them into the house and kind of, I don't know, like that even our platonic friendships have a degree of like intimacy to them, or a degree of comfort with like physical touch and like that sort of thing, you know? So like, I think the way that we've sort of thought about it is like the more that we can make sure that all of our relationships look kind of warm and affectionate and all of that, the less it's going to stand out that like a person that we're sleeping with is also happens to be over for a party. You know what I mean? And
or for
like
dinner.
And a hug is exchanged or a back rub. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think we answered that. Thank you. That was very good. Let's see.
Scroll down.
Scroll down. I think she'll select another one for us.
And if, as we're talking, I'm sure that you guys are doing this
we can't
already,
keep up with the comments.
but
We're trying.
But if you guys have your own experiences and would like to contribute to the conversation,
yeah,
too,
I think that's gonna have to
that
will happen, and I think that I'm excited for folks to connect here too that are looking for folks that are in kind of different boats than we are. I see some single parents here.
Some childcare stuff, right?
Yeah. I think with childcare that because we still need that, right? Even when we want to go on dates. And I think that we've really just attempted to cultivate community, and that's kind of the best you can do, right? Because it takes a village, and the more community that you can cultivate, the more people that you have that can do that for you. Let's see. For people not in the E&M open poly world, always ask, what do your kids think? What do your kids know? I feel like we answered that
a little bit.
How do you balance your time together? What does checking in with each other look like? Let's do that one.
Ooh.
This has been really challenging. I think it really depends on your kids' age. Once again, we had our children very close together, which if you're not a parent yet, or if you only have one, I do not recommend.
She's so mad at me.
I'm not mad. But we have to also, I think, once again, talking about our calendar, like we really have to try and schedule time. Like, okay, Wednesday night after we put the kids to bed, we both need to pop up so that we can hang out. We can, check in and talk about how we're doing. What does that look like right now? We're happy to have conversations. That's just honest. Like our 2 and 4-year-old are really demanding right now in terms 3. Wow, she just turned 3.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the attention that they need is really high. And I know that that's going to shift. We talked about that, and people with older kids know that that's kind of always changing. But right now, scheduling it, and then I think just being really intentional in like the minutes in between, right? Like when we're making dinner, like when all life is happening, like just being very intentional about connecting with one another. When we do have even a little bit of space, it goes a long way.
Yeah. I was, what you just said now, like finding the little moments, I think is so important, because you might, and like, this is the case for parents too, even who are not trying to take on the challenge of like dating on top of all of the other demands of our lives and self-care and all of that, right? Like how do you make enough time for each other and enough time to like continue to cultivate your I don't know, your bond?
Yeah. I think a lot of grace is involved too. Yeah. A lot of grace, because the amount that children kind of deplete from you, they give a lot too. But I think just knowing like that if your partner is edgy because they've been home with the kids for many hours and have had to like really help them regulate and regulate themselves, like you just have to have a lot of grace if they're snippy at you, right? Because like it actually isn't about me, and I think that is also like a really important component.
Yeah, but like you said, the little eyes of the storm that you can find in the course of the day, like, because I don't know how many nights we plan to like pop up and hang out or whatever that we just don't. So because of that, that can be a frustration. And I think that it helps us feel like not only more connected to one another, but like more present even in our parenting and all throughout our life, if we're also trying to identify like what are those tiny little eyes of the storm that pass over us, where we can find like some meaningful moment of connection, because it does go a long way.
Yeah. Next one. How many hours each week do you get for your personal time? Living under capitalism, it's challenging. And I can only imagine how this is for single parents. Anyone here who's a single parent, you're a hero. Like truly, like please take that in. You are a goddess, god, hero. And we're in awe. Because can't imagine. But for us, we're able to cover each other at least for that. But it's not a lot. Like How much? How would you say?
Well, if we're talking like right at this specific moment, because like
Right. We're in a really
this is a
demanding
really
moment. That's
interesting
true.
week. This is a really interesting
We've
week
probably
for us
had
to
our
talk.
hardest parenting
Yeah.
week of our life this week. So
I know. I'm thinking about like
what's more
dating
normal?
and parenting, and like what I feel today is like just don't do it. And oh, parenting or dating? Like neither. Don't do either. Don't do either.
Stop.
No, but so all of that to say, like we're in this heightened period of where like like the well feels really dry right now, both in terms of like time for ourselves, time with one another, like time for dating, all of that. So
I'd say we try to give each other like 4 to 8 hours a week. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Which is
that sounds right.
Crazy, but
That
that's what we are grateful for at this point.
Yeah. And in seasons, that's
Different.
been more, right?
Yeah.
In seasons where like it feels like we develop a really strong rhythm at home and the kids don't have anything that like any like profound like moment of growth that they're really like working on navigating and getting through, like that can feel a lot more spacious. And there's times when it just feels like we're like
yeah, because there's some night there we really have in our easier seasons, like there's been weeks where like I can be out even up to like 3 nights in a week.
Yeah.
Like that has happened. And but right now it's not that. Let's see.
Goes childcare ideas, right?
Yeah, I don't really know what. How did you guys approach each other? Well, I don't want to skip that. So, single parent looking for ideas to date when childcare is an issue. Also, my daughter is 10. And there's not really, I don't know what the question is. I know we talked about childcare, like community, cultivating community. Like, I know single parent dynamics are really different, and I wish I had more to say about that. How did you guys approach each other to create this dynamic? Well, we met in college. So, it's kind of a long story, but basically, we'll do
keep
fast.
Each other,
we'll go fast.
yeah,
Boom,
we'll
boom, boom, boom. So basically, we were in college. I was coming to this point, which I think maybe some people here are at, where they realize monogamy isn't really what you want. It doesn't really make sense. So what else is out there? I discovered that I wanted to be with multiple people. This also happened at a point where I met Daniel while I was dating somebody else, and like really was wrestling with like what I wanted. And I once I settled on, I felt like I had to pick because I did. So I did, and I picked Daniel. Congratulations. And so then I was really frank. Like I was like, I pretty sure I've realized I'm polyamorous. So I need to do this. Like, are you on board with that? And I think he was 21. So he was like, yeah, let's do it, in our idealism.
Yeah. Well, and from like a positive point, like from like the optimistic side, what you're thinking of is like, oh yeah, like I want to have that level of like freedom and availability and all of that. But like, I want to be able to say yes to life, like when it comes and presents itself to me. But all of that at the moment for me was like so hypothetical. And like pretty soon after that, like the kind of job that I was working, like, okay, this is another thing about our experience. Throughout our 20s, you were working as a
bartender
and I was working as a teacher, right? And so like our natural modes of life, like hers was very well suited toward meeting people, right? And mine was not, right? So like I think that for me, like we talked about seasons of this, right? And the way in which this started out was in a very long season of you kind of trying to figure out and understand what it was that you wanted out of like, a non-monogamous relationship, what you wanted your other relationships to look like, all of that. And you were able to exercise that. Whereas for me, it stayed kind of like hypothetical. And in the meantime, I had to do like sort of the inner work of giving you that was required to give you that space to do that, which is of course a longer story too.
Yeah. Yeah. So to answer the question, we were very young when we met, and we knew we wanted to be life partners. So we have done a lot of hard work to figure out how to make it work through, yeah. Let's see.
But that is a different challenge for people who have much longer standing relationship patterns
Totally.
and assumptions.
Totally.
Right.
Where we were, it was our intention off the bat, and it still took us a long time to like really figure it out. How do y'all balance gendered norms around housework and childcare? This, why are you smiling? This is where I just get to really like talk about how amazing this man is. I think Daniel has always like really seen and understood it as like equal work. Like we're both as responsible for the household as we are for like every other area. And so I think, I don't know.
Well, and that's not to say that like that there aren't ways in which like I'm having to like disavow assumptions of like masculinity and what that, you know, and all of that. But I think that but like just to recognize the question there, David, is that is a dynamic that rears its head for so many people. You know, you want to take on this big, I don't know, like it's not really mentioning like in here, you know, the challenge of like dating, right? But like, let's say
they're asking about housework and childcare specifically.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I just feel like it's like I don't know. Daniel is just like you want to live in a space that's clean, right? And so you work together to figure it out. And like I don't know. I just think that, I mean, he's the only man that's not true. He's the only man I live with, but that's not true. I don't know. I just think we both see it as equal responsibility. I don't really know how to answer that differently. And maybe that's because I have limited experience. I haven't partnered with another person and had to navigate like them not seeing it as equal responsibility.
Or not seeing that their behavior like indicates that they don't think it's equal responsibility.
Right, because I guess the only other thing I can add is maybe this will be helpful. It's about mental load, right? You've heard this term, mental load. So traditionally, women are the ones that are kind of keeping track of everything. It's like, oh, the toilet needs to be cleaned and the dishes need to be done and laundry needs to be done. So it's about more than like coming to your partner talking in very heteronormative terms. That's the question. Like what needs to be done, and instead of depending on them to direct you, taking it upon yourself to kind of look around and like also make that your responsibility. And I think that Daniel does a really good job of also holding the mental load, which is very helpful.
Yeah. And I think, and again, speaking in the hetero context, I think like men have to be willing to like examine, you know, because I think it's easy to say like, oh yeah, I'm one of the better ones, right? Or I'm like a more evolved person who wants to do this in an egalitarian way. And the reality is like that's people's behavior doesn't match that, right? And so I think a lot of it comes from people's willingness to reflect on their own relationship dynamic and how much it does reflect like those gendered norms around housework and childcare. And I think for a partner, it also takes like a level of bravery and courage to like voice when it's falling too much into like those really imbalanced gender norms.
Okay. Thank you, love. Is there a point that, sorry, I had to come down to look for a question. I hope everyone's reading the comments because there's a lot of really good information in these comments. And I hope you guys can continue to chat with one another because this is good stuff here. But is there a point that you consciously tell a potential partner that you're a parent? I usually hold off since I feel different from a stereotypical parent and don't want the assumptions.
That is really difficult to navigate.
I think it's difficult to I think it's different to navigate as a father or a mother, once again speaking in very binary gender terms, but I think our experiences are really different with that, because for me it is on my profile on Field like toddler mama, because I really need people to know, like, because there are people that don't want to date parents, right? There's people who are even rude about it in their profiles are like, no kids. Which I'm grateful for because I'm like, great. But
Makes it easier.
yeah, it
It's
makes it
easier though.
easier. But the kind of demands on me currently as a mom are so big. And so I need people that are gonna know what they're getting themselves into immediately, even on some level, right? Um, even if it's a play partner, I still want people that know and respect that that is a huge part of my identity. Um, so it's on my profile, and I mean, I think personally, like, it's I guess if you're looking for really casual play partners and it doesn't matter to you, then it's not important, but
Yeah, I think it all depends on like the level of expectation in the
exactly.
relationship, right? So if you're um I think in like a context like that, like you're both looking for a play partner, right? With like kind of limited availability that might only like you guys might only meet up once in in a very irregular basis. It's not maybe necessary. But if you're kind of wading into like a relationship where somebody's expectations might be like a little bit closer to kind of like mainstream sort of relationship escalator sort
Mhm.
of like that it's going to hit all of these milestones, right? Like the person that you're with is also going to need the chance to like measure, like to take an assessment of what they want and their own expectations and kind of see if what you're able to give and what you're able to be in that season matches up with what it is that they're looking for. But I do think that it's a feta like at the beginning of my kind of journey with this,
I
like
remember this.
especially in like in more casual settings where I like meet somebody at a bar or something like that, like this was the thing that I never knew how to navigate, like about
At the
first about being a
beginning
parent, but
and
then
being
secondly
married.
like about before that about being married.
Yeah.
It's like, when do I say this, and maybe in that situation, if you're looking for something a little bit more spontaneous and casual, it's like it's not really that important to say something. But if you know you're if you're trafficking in an environment where people are probably going to be expecting a certain level of like consistency, or I don't know, you just know that they're going to populate it with the assumptions of how like hitting the milestones for how a relationship plays out, then you probably got to say something.
Oh, this is a good one. Oh, this is a good one from Aaron. How do you guys deal with the paradox of dating other parents and not having a place to be sexual?
A lot of cars. It's like teenagehood all over again. A lot of cars, so just make it fun. No.
Yeah, I think this one is challenging because I think like when I am looking for something more consistent or like long term, I actually I like and prefer dating other parents because I think that level of understanding um is there in a way that people that aren't parents can't really understand. That's just real, right? Um so yeah, this is really challenging, and I think hotels is what a lot of people do. I think they also
Just not the most budget conscious
not the most
for,
budget conscious, I know.
but also like sometimes that's what it is.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of people do that. I know that people also like I think Daniel and I haven't been in this situation for like a long period of time, but I think that's something that I've heard other people doing is like Daniel will take the kids on like a camping trip for the weekend
Mm-hmm.
or like maybe go visit grandma for the weekend and like just get creative and like where you're going just for an evening. So I have heard of people doing that. Um
Which, like, for me as a parent, like that's a really great opportunity to
to get
like
some solo
to get some
time.
solo time with the kids. And I think if you're out of kind of this stretch of like really bristly feelings around being like around like if we're out of that stretch where like I'm feeling a little bit more bristly about you being in our space with somebody else, then like that actually can be a really great solution where like everybody gets a little bit of what they need out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you also that has also been a learning curve for us too, is like what is the like what is our relationship to this space and other people, like it's our space, right? But like, you know, if I'm taking the kids for an overnighter, right? Like
Yeah,
what are
so
you
we're
able
gonna
to
skip and
use?
go back then because this is actually two questions. I'm gonna go back to Liz's question, but do you all host sexual partners in your home, or does it always have to be out of the house? Um, so our our bigger challenge, mm, it doesn't always have to be out of the house. Once again, it's just about getting the kids out, right?
Yeah, I
And
don't think that that's as much like idea, like it hasn't really happened very much in our house, but that hasn't been so much ideological as it has just practical,
yeah.
right? Like just practical.
And we've mostly dated people that have been able to host, and that's actually something I've included on my profile just because I find that extra challenge for me is just a lot. And so for me, I actually have included that in my profile. Like, hey, I can't, it's hosting for me is a little difficult. So like
Yeah.
ideally you can host. And I think that for
And it
me, just being intentional about who I'm even starting to connect with is helpful for me because it's just an extra thing to navigate when you're navigating so many other things that can feel difficult. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm a weenie, but that's okay. Going back to Liz's question, how do you keep your communication clear and respectful with one another? Do you have tools that keep resentment from building between the two of you, whether it be in dating or anything
oh,
else?
we've totally figured this out. No. No, that's a that is a constant um reworking to
Yeah, I
figure it
mean, I
out.
think
Yeah.
we've been with each other for a really long time. So I think we've really long time. We've been each other for I mean, it's been a while, 13 years. So I think we've had a chance to do a lot of practicing, right? And figuring out what works and what doesn't. I think vulnerability is a really huge piece here. Because if you're not willing to be vulnerable and share with your partner what is very honest about how you're feeling, right? Even if it's embarrassing or like ugly even, like if you're
Yeah.
not able to really share how you're really feeling, and not the things that are like above that, right? Because we can really focus on those things that are above it, and it's really not about that at all. It's about this feeling that's like a few layers deep. So I think that's really key is like learning how to be really vulnerable with each other and hold space in those moments of vulnerability so that you're creating a culture of safety.
Yeah.
um
Well, I think that with like consensual non-monogamy, there's like a lot of these, there's a kind of dogma attached to it. Like there's an idea about like how you you want to strive to feel in a situation, right? Or what you
right,
want, or like
what you think.
beliefs that you would vocally profess, right? But for all of us, like there is such a disparity between like the beliefs that we profess and like how it actually feels in our body when something happens. You know what I mean? Like I can say I want to feel a certain way about you going out and seeing other people, but like if I if my body responds in a different way in that moment, right? Like but I also have to be honest about that gap there. Like honest with myself about that gap, and then secondarily like honest with you about that gap.
Mhm.
And I think that's ultimately the thing that helps to kind of like keep resentment from building. Because
Yeah.
if you're not honest about it and you keep like kind of like sticking with the party line of what it is you want to believe, right? And what it is like the belief that you want to have, then um it just creates a lot of building feelings that never get addressed, and that's when like it gives way to resentment and things blow up.
Yeah, and I think just to add one more thing, I think this is where that like building in time together is really important. Because if you're not feeling connected, then it is more difficult to share honestly. And I know for me, that's a really big trigger. Like when I'm not feeling connected to Daniel is when we seem to have the hardest time with communication and respect and resentment not building. But thanks, Liz.
Well, there's
see.
some boundaries questions. I think
John.
you'd be really great at
Okay, we'll do
answering
that.
the
I'm just trying to do them in order.
Yeah.
Do you guys, Jonathan, do you have any red flag warnings where the other has the ability to step up and state when certain situations are off limits? Like, please do not date my best friend or my boss. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's kind of two parts to this question. Red flag warnings is a little different than like boundaries with who we date. But let's just talk about boundaries with who we date. I think once again, going back to that open communication, like for us, I think we've tried to put kind of boundaries around it because Daniel really likes to date my friends or like our
our How many of your friends have I dated? How many friends have I dated?
Well, Daniel's pretty demisexual, so like he with existing connections, he tends to like enjoy developing that. So that's something that we've had to work through because that's been a little bit challenging for me with like certain people. But that's
like
been a really
attractions develop.
Yeah,
right?
but that's been a really good opportunity for me to like examine why I have that boundary, and is it really about like not wanting to feel discomfort and just wanting to control him. And I think we've done really good work when we've like reached those boundaries. But currently, yes, we do have a few. I have a lot of cousins, so I'm like, let's not
you
not
make it
do
sound
that.
like you might make it sound like we've gone through like a bulleted list of your cousins that I've been like, so
No, we
yes,
haven't.
no.
But I'm just answering the question. Yeah. So I think cousins is one.
Yeah, I mean, I think
uncles, family.
I think family definitely feels like a boundary.
And then
I do think things like somebody's bought like something that would really impact the other person's
spaces that they exist in.
Yeah. I think that those are longer conversations. I think that both of us want to like cultivate a type of relationship where like things aren't unilateral like no's or like I have this sort of unilateral veto power over something. We always want it to be a conversation, but I think we're also cognizant of like that it would be a really different dynamic for like for you to be like, hey, that family member of yours, is that all right? You know what I mean? Like that is a different level of like sensitivity, and logistically like what the degree of messy that can get, and not just messy for you but messy for all of us, right? I think that that's really what it's about. It's like we kind of observe boundaries around like what could potentially get really entangled and really messy. But nothing is ever like an automatic. We try not to do like I don't know, at least in our thing, like I feel like we don't do veto stuff, but we at least make it a conversation. But it is with that understanding that some of those things like probably are off limits for like a good reason. If I want to push that boundary, like I probably need to assess something too.
All right, Amelia's question. What was your journey like coming back into sexual dynamic after having 2 babies, feeling sexy, wanting to be touched, etc.? We have a 9-month-old and a 2-year-old. First of all, you are in it. 9-month and 2-year-old, that is in it. You're exhausted. You're exhausted. And that's maybe going to make it so you don't feel sexy a lot, and that's okay. I think the first thing I'll say is that life is long and that it's okay to have like seasons where you don't feel like you're being particularly sexual together or separately. That's okay. Like you're going to have your time. You're going to have your time, I promise. For me, what was really helpful, what's always helpful, is I like to masturbate a lot. And that really helps me to stay in touch with my erotic self and my sexuality. And maybe I don't want to be touched by other people all the time, but just keeping that alive in yourself. Keep the fire burning even a little bit, And like, honestly, I used nap time a lot for that with my babies. Like, nurse them to sleep and then just kind of
establish some distance.
And that's honest, and I think that that's really human and really real, and I'm excited to talk about that more because our erotic energy is really important to keep stoked. And that for me, masturbation was a really key with that. I think also like wearing lingerie around the house was kind of a big one for me. Even if I'm like home with babies and there's like milk and toys everywhere, like I think it still helped for me to feel connected to my erotic energy. To just do something like that, to just slip on some lingerie and remember that I'm hot. I also like self-portraiture a lot. That was something that has always been really helpful for me in keeping that erotic energy alive. Our sexual dynamic together has definitely been difficult in that particular season that you're talking about, just because babies at that stage need so much proximity, and that is very normal and like developmentally best for them to be on your body, which makes that very challenging, right? Like, how are you going to find time to boink when your kids are around all the time? So I think we actually kind of got more into quickies than we ever were before. Like trying to find some quickies was fun for us.
Yeah.
Also going back to the idea of community, and I think other people in here have talked about neighbors, and we've utilized our commune slash neighbors. They live in a back house, and we did a swap, because if you're not connecting sexually like over long periods of time, yeah, that is really challenging and can affect your relationship. So like, can you have a neighbor come take your kids for a walk so you can have 20 minutes even, like that can be really huge.
But yeah. And I think that's like, that speaks to like the coming back to the sexual dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're talking about like what's internal to like a primary relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but I wonder about like outside of that too,
Yeah, I think it's really nice to like, I think it was a fun process actually for us to like learn how much each other could get from like going out and like having sex with other people in a way that wasn't in that little window, right? I think that actually more than anything helped me to develop like a high level of the feeling of compersion, is like knowing like, hey, I'm chill here with these two babies. I'm going to cuddle and I'm going to get all of my oxytocin from them. And I am going to know that he's out there getting it. And like, and that would feel really good, because I knew that he was getting taken care of in that way, in a way that he really needs to, right? So I think actually that helped me develop the feeling of compersion more than anything, in a different way. And like, just knowing that. And that's kind of a really cool thing about non-monogamy too, is that there's that option there of like, we would like to have more sex with each other, but we're in a season where that is so difficult. But it's actually easier
to have sex with
other people.
And it's easier to be like, I understand.
I get it. Please go.
You'll be happier when you come back.
Yeah.
Like, it'll be good. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to a lot of commentary. Andrea, are you ever concerned? I just looked for a question mark, so I don't know what this is. Are you ever concerned about having to break up with someone and explain to your kids why you aren't seeing someone anymore? Once again, going back to like how we try and handle it similarly to friends, we haven't had someone around enough, I think. And kids aren't really, I mean, at our kids' age, they're not as like, they're not noticing as much like who's around and who's not. So I think we haven't had to deal with this exactly because of our kids' age mostly, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's a very different question if that person is like really integrated into your home life, right? Like, and really integrated into your home life in a way that other like friends and family members and like whatever are not, right? So I think that's that question of having to explain it has, I don't know, has to do with that. Whereas like for us, I think that's one of the things that keeps it less noticeable, is like we're comfortable like really integrating people into the life of our home, but we have that same level of comfort and desire with
our
friends,
platonic relationships,
with our
as well.
friends and platonic relationships. I imagine it's like really different for like a single parent who's dating and who wants to see the person that they're dating a little bit more and likes who they are around their kids and sees them as like a kind of positive influence. Like that's a totally different um dynamic that we haven't really encountered and experienced. But
Yeah. Um, I'm just realizing time is going very fast, so I just want to mention that we will be continuing this chat afterwards, so you can stick around for that. Sorry. I'm looking for another question. We are out to our kids, but not to their grandparents. It worries me that our kids who are older are having to keep our secret. Is this something you've thought about? Yes. It is. We're also not out to our parents actually we're out to we're out to my dad, which is really nice. Makes things a lot easier. But with our parents,
with our moms.
Yeah, we're not wanting to shock their nervous system. So we're definitely
it's not about us keeping a secret. It's that we sense that they do not want to know. Like we do not go out of our way
to
not tell them. Like there have been moments where like my mom has been over and we've had friends over. Some of those people are like people that one of us are sleeping with. You know what I mean? But like in the same way that we want it to be kind of indistinguishable to to our kids, like I think it's also, at least on some level, like not that distinguishable for our parents. So like we haven't gone out of our way to kind of keep it a secret, but we also know that like they're not going to ask the question either, and I think that's in part because they're not ready to know. I think they do know on a level.
Yeah, they
Wouldn't
know.
you say that? They just they kind of, there's a level on which they actually do know, but they also have kind of made it clear in other ways that they don't want to know.
Yeah, but what would you have to say about like when the kids get older and like the pressure of having to keep a secret? Because I don't want that for them, and I can see how you guys wouldn't want that for your kids.
Yeah, I think again, for at least like we can only speak to our experience, and for us like seeing other people and dating other people is a part of a larger framework of developing like a really vibrant and like loving like community of friends and neighbors. That like I think that, I don't know, maybe this is naive of me to think this, but I think that what we would like to impart to our kids is that there's a kind of, we would like to normalize this idea that like for instance in like this really sensitive heteronormative context of like monogamy and like all of the assumptions that entails, like we would like them to see it as completely normal that you would have a close male friendship, right? And that completely normal that I would have a close female friendship, like whether or not I'm sleeping with them, right? And so I think that like for us, I would like to think as our kids age into like the time that they would ask those questions, there's also, they've been raised in such an environment that there's also nothing like extraordinary about the fact that we would be spending time with somebody else, with another person, like outside the home,
Yeah. I mean, and I think if I could give another piece of advice, I mean, once again, I'm not where you're at, so I do want to acknowledge that, but I think that like you just have to be, you just kind of got to let your kids know like it's okay. It's okay if you spill the beans. It'll be okay. Like don't worry about it and know that you'll be able to handle that like if it happens, right? Trust yourself because our parents are kind of hold on us forever. We're adults.
Yeah.
I hate it. But I get it too. I get it. It is tricky. This is being recorded. I see that as a quick question. Let's do one more just to remind people we will continue this in the group chat on Field. There will be a link that's dropped in the chat so you guys can join because I think we'll be able to keep going. This is exciting. We have a lot to talk about. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. do you have any emotional boundaries with new partners? From Andrea. Would y'all ever be okay with if one of you started to prioritize another relationship outside the two of you? So we have ongoing conversations about this. I think for us, our intention at the moment is that we are hierarchical just because. All right, so well, I mean, as we raise, you can answer separately if you want. Maybe what I mean is, as we're raising our toddlers in this season of parenting being so incredibly demanding, there's just not really space for a relationship that could do that. We definitely like can see that happening in the future and like would have that
as
conversation.
the demands of parenting become different.
Yes,
right?
and as we just have to work together so much as I think like what makes it seem not possible at the moment. But I don't know, I think once again like that head heart disconnection and like what it would actually feel like for us would probably definitely be more challenging if it did happen. It's definitely something that we're open to, but it's not our intention because you can't predict what's going to happen, especially, I mean, in life or in non-monogamy.
Yeah. And when you said like our relationship is a lot more hierarchical right now, I think that that's just due to that's a practical thing and a pragmatic thing that's determined by like our desire to parent together, and because we're wanting to parent together and do so much of that together, like in a way, like our relationship with one another is kind of like all a part of our relationship with our children. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So because when I'm thinking about this question, like prioritizing another relationship outside of our relationship wouldn't just mean like the way in which our relationship functions. That would also mean me prioritizing another relationship, not just over our relationship, but also like our relationship as like a family unit in a kind of way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's
in a way.
That's not
I mean,
like that's not entirely fair, but I think that's just how I would feel in that moment. But at the same time, like there are seasons where you are going to want to give increased priority to a relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And what it'll actually look like is you getting a lot more one-on-one time with that individual than me, right? Uh-huh. Like that has happened. Mm-hmm. That has happened.
And I think
kind of often, or often enough.
Yeah. I think it's we're open to it, but it just depends on the season that we're in. And for us, once again, going back to that open communication, our boundaries are kind of shifting a lot, to be honest, like depending once again on like what's going on with Daniel, what's going on with me. I think just to speak really quickly about like postpartum and like the hormones that can happen there, like your needs can be really different depending on what's going on with your hormones, or not to just make it individual like that. Even anyone that's like intensely caring for a child, latest research says that really does impact you as an individual and rewires your whole brain. So like when you're dealing with that, you don't really know like what kind of boundaries are going to shift, and like it just does have to be an ongoing conversation. And as uncomfortable as it is, there just has to be a lot of fluidity. We want to control things because we feel safer, but it doesn't always work that way, I guess is what I'll say. Let me answer another one. I know y'all kids are younger, but I'm curious what you think about play that can leave visible marks. Would you keep it to more conspicuous places? I think
usually it is, but yeah.
What do you mean?
Like more concealed places.
Oh, it said conspicuous. Yeah, I think once again, thinking about like what's age appropriate and like when you're ready to answer those questions, right? Like right now, I would definitely be a little more cautious about the kind of marks, because I don't know, I think you don't really want to like have to lie to your kids, right? But right now, let's say if that did happen, like I do enjoy impact play, actually. So this question is very relevant. And for me, I like to keep it in places where I don't have to explain it. I think is nicer for me, just because once again of their ages. I think if my kids were a lot older, like I think it would be I'd feel more ready to explain that like playing consensually like that is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think until once again, like until you're ready to answer the questions, and it feels age appropriate, I think if you can, keeping it to more conspicuous places, because there's still so much you can do, right? Huh?
No.
You know, am I using it wrong?
That's all right.
Sorry, maybe I'm using conspicuous and conspicuous. Places you can't see is better, I think, until your kids are older and you're ready to explain yourself. Okay, I think that let's do one more and then we'll jump into the chat. We'll wrap up. Jennifer, does it feel scary another relationship could become more important than the relationship between you two? What if you two break up? That feels scary, sad, which is why I like prioritizing my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very scary. Very scary. And like honestly, both of us have been in places where like we were really, really, really into another person and it does feel scary. That's very real. But I think it's kind of what you sign up for.
But also that I think the other thing that's important to mention is that that possibility exists in life already.
Yeah.
You know, like
non-monogamy doesn't change that. Consensual non-monogamy, excuse me, does not change that.
Yeah.
It's always a possibility.
And I like to think that for us, actually engaging in the thing that on the surface feels scarier has actually helped prevent us from moving into more toxic places in our relationship and more toxic patterns that would ultimately probably spell our undoing anyway, you know.
All right, well, we're time, so thank you everyone for joining. I think we could have gone for a really long time, but thank you everyone for coming, and that was a really great conversation. We can meet now in the chat. The link is going to be dropped right now in the comments, and we can continue this conversation. I would love to do that.
And in
I
the
feel
spirit
like
of parenting, as we also feed our kids dinner.
yes.
So.
Yeah. So thanks again, everyone. And if a lot of my work is centered on like this conversation. So if you want to connect with me, I would enjoy that too. So I'll talk to you in the chat. Bye.